Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Assalamu alaikum, brothers and sisters. This is Edward Ahmed Mitchell, the Deputy Director of the Council on American Islamic Relations, welcoming you to today's episode of CAIR on Air, the Muslim Action Hour. Thank you so much for joining us, and a special thank you to our listeners on American Muslim 360, which broadcasts our program across the country in addition to our online appearance. So thank you all for joining us today. Inshallah, we're going to be discussing a very important topic, and that is the upcoming vote. November 3rd, the presidential election, as well as other elections at the local, state, and federal level. Many people are concerned about whether or not people who turn out to vote will face suppression tactics, whether their mail-in votes will be secure and safe. And we've seen a few incidents in at least 2 states that we're going to focus on today of concerning issues that CAIR chapters are working to address, inshallah. And so I want to welcome on our guest on today's program. First is the Executive Director of CAIR New York, Attorney Afaf Nasher. Assalamu alaikum, Afaf. How are you?
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Good to see you again, Brother Edward.
Good to see you. And I'd also like to welcome on Sister Hodo Dahir, who is the Government Affairs Coordinator of CAIR Minnesota. Assalamu alaikum, Sister Dahir.
Wa alaikum assalam, Brother Edward. Good to meet you, and meet you, Sister Afaf.
Jazakallah khair. Good to be with you too, sis.
Yes, we're so happy to have you as part of the CAIR team, Sister Hodo. And let's dive right into it. So we all know the election is coming up very fast. Many people are going to be mailing in their ballots, inshallah. Many people are going to be turning out to vote in person. And, we've seen all sorts of controversy around this election, mostly stirred up by President Trump and his attempts to reduce confidence in the election and confidence in the vote. But we've also seen, issues with militia groups, some risk of them showing up as poll watchers at different election sites. We've seen attempts to smear political activists in states and accuse them of engaging in improper behavior, particularly Muslim activists. And we've seen other concerning incidents. So I just want to talk about what's going on in New York and Minnesota, and inshallah, what you are doing to help and what other people around the country can learn from the work that you're doing, inshallah. So first, let me start with CAIR New York. What's the recent incident that happened? Just what happened? Give us the background.
Sure, Brother Edward. So, we have a few changes in our election laws here in New York. Even though we're usually seen as a progressive state, we're actually doing not just absentee voting for the first time, but really also mail-in ballots as well. And so, especially with the pandemic, that's become an increasingly interesting way for people to vote where they're concerned about their health. And in this past June primary, we saw in one particular town what we believe is something that really was discovered almost accidentally, but suspected. And the background on this is in Erie County, which is near Buffalo, there is a community called Lackawanna in which the Muslims have actually been increasing in their population, but also in their civic engagement. They've realized that so many of the policies that impact them on a daily basis are controlled by others that don't represent their interests. And so they've really come together to push out the voting within their community members. They've actually started to run for local boards, for example, and they've been met with resistance by the status quo, those who actually have the power presently. In this particular issue, Brother Edward, there was a huge effort to get people to vote, and it was occurring through absentee ballots and in other forms. And when the absentee ballots were delivered to the Board of Election, one of the activists there suspected that her vote was not counted. And so they had an election lawyer and they did a FOIL, right, which is a Freedom of Information and Law request to essentially see whether or not her vote was counted. And in that request, there were broader questions. And what we ended up finding was that there were over 200 absentee ballots whose legitimacy were challenged and objected to. And when we got the list of the names, every single one of them had an overtly Muslim or Middle Eastern sounding name, except for one who is apparently known in the community to work with the Muslim community. And so that, of course, forced a bigger investigation like, hey, what's going on? On what basis were the objections? And within a few hours of the request and the response, those objections were actually dropped which of course only made us question things even more, the legitimacy of those objections. And so what we've been doing at this point is not only pushing through questions, as are people on the ground, as is an election attorney, and we've been getting media attention. And then we also contacted the New York State Attorney General, Letitia James's office, and we said, hey, you guys have a civil rights department. One of the things you investigate is voter suppression and voter intimidation. The Muslim community expects an investigation here. And I'm happy to report that we did actually, through several conversations, through some media attention, we were actually able to secure an investigation that's presently open into the voter suppression and why those absentee ballots were targeted to begin with.
And before we turn to CAIR Minnesota to talk about the incident there, do you have any information about why they were rejected? Like, what were the excuses or the explanations that they gave as being the problem?
So the initial question that was posed and answered by the Board of Elections sort of insinuated that perhaps there were some discrepancies in the absentee ballot form. But when we scrutinized the actual names, what we found is that some of the names of the people for the absentee ballots that are objected to didn't even request an absentee ballot. So for me, and I'm not saying this is a conclusion, rather it's something that needs to be investigated. If a person didn't even submit an absentee ballot, how was it that they had discrepancy on their form, right? So it seems like something much bigger. It seems like perhaps Muslim names are just picked out of a registry, or I'm not really sure. But those are the kind of questions that are now on my mind and what we're investigating.
Okay. Yeah, Hamza, we're glad that you're on that issue. That's I mean, the idea that you'd have 200 ballots and almost all Muslim names, I mean, that's concerning, well, to put it mildly. Let's turn to CAIR Minnesota. Sister Hodo, tell us what's the recent incident that happened there in the state of Minnesota, and I think you might have a video to share with us. Feel free to start off with the video or just tell us what's going on first. Completely up to you.
Well, I can just give you a little snapshot of the video. But we can share it later on the video if we have a chance. But yeah, so recently we got a video that's giving us a disinformation and dismantling the effort the Muslim community are doing here in Minnesota. And what this individual is saying is information that's not credible. And we're hearing that he definitely got bribed from other people to discredit the Somali community specifically. And I believe one of the reasons why at this critical moment it's coming up, it is because we're not Somali and Muslim community here in Minnesota have a high turnout every single time. Even our primary elections, we do have the one of the highest, in not only in the state, but I believe in the nation. And due to that, seeing that the numbers of the Muslim engaging in their voting rights, what we see is that these people are trying to discredit us and give our people fear of saying, hey, these people are doing fraud in election. And these are the types of issues that enables the Islamophobia to target our Muslim communities. And not only that, it hurts us in every aspect of it. And it takes away our freedom to fight for all the things that we really are trying to do. And what we did, we are definitely in conversation with the, what's his name? Keith Ellison, who is the Minnesota State Attorney General, currently the AG, and he is gonna hopefully try to investigate. He's a Muslim man, so that's his job to figure it out how to not only investigate this, but also give us the right information and give us our voice. And it's up to us as a community to really not only battle, because not only are we battling disinformation about campaign and voting suppression, but we're battling social justice issue here in Minnesota every single day. We're fighting our rights not only to protest, but we're fighting for our rights to vote every single day. And we're going to make sure that our voices are heard and we are concerned for our communities. And in November, I don't think nothing is going to stop us to show up and turn out the same way we turn out, over 90%. Like there's a small town called Cedar Riverside, which is the town that's being explicitly being targeted on this video, which is where Ilhan Omar comes from, one of her districts, her district. And that's one of them that has the highest turnout in our state. And inshallah, they're going to come out with COVID or without COVID, with proper safety. And inshallah, we're going to do our best. we've seen the Ramsey County, which is another county down, not Hennepin County, but the Ramsey County sheriff is not even giving the information about this individual and how they were collaborating and working together. So if we don't even have any clear evidence to support it, it's just a moment to discredit us as a community, but also spread fear in our community and stop us from voting and being an amazing community and turning out our effort. So.
Yeah. Well, Hamza, we're glad that, very quickly this story seems to have been debunked by mainstream media outlets and the truth exposed. And so it's a positive thing. It's bad that this happens, but it's good that people quickly recognized it for what it is. It's predictable. Every election cycle, you see these attacks on the Muslim community, on people of color, Latinos, Muslims. I mean, it's the same thing over and over again, every 2 years, every 4 years, and it's getting tired and it's getting obvious. If this is the best they've got problems. So Hamza, we're glad that the Somali American community in Minnesota and the Muslim community in Minnesota is so active, so engaged, so mobilized, and can quickly stand up to defend itself against these sort of preposterous attacks. Now, Hodo, is there a video you wanted to share with us on this subject before we go to the next question?
I'm going to try to pull it up.
Okay, go ahead. Let's see if the technology cooperates, inshallah. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
Yes.
We'll say inshallah, in the real way, not the way Joe Biden said it, the real way.
So the video is too long, but let me see if I can get the...
Is it the full? Yeah, well, if it's the full, don't worry about it. If it's full on, what we can do is we can post the link in the chat. So anyone who wants to watch it, they can click on it separately and they can watch it, inshallah. If it's a long video, that's no problem, inshallah. So just, you can give it to our producer and she'll post it in the comment section on Facebook, inshallah.
Okay, I'll just post it on the link downstairs. Okay. It's too long, so...
Afaf, thank you, Sister Hodo. Afaf, let me go back to you for the next question. So elections coming up. What are the rules in New York? You said you all are now you're doing absentee balloting. You'll have in-person balloting. What are the other things that you're concerned about as you get closer to election day? What are the things you're watching out for in terms of voter suppression, making sure people have the right to get out and vote safely and securely?
Yes. So we actually, if I had to choose one form that people utilize to get their vote out, I would actually advise people to go in person during early voting. So in New York, for the first year, we have early voting. Early voting takes place from October 24th to November 1st here in New York State. And it allows people to beat the rush and the long lines and the congestion of November 3rd if they want to, rather than the absentee ballots. Having said that, we understand that there is a real concern, especially for those who experience various health risks where they don't want to go out to any center, and absentee ballots are the way to go. Now, in New York, there is something called bundling, in which, activists and those on the ground can collect ballots, and they can actually deliver them to the Board of Election. Now, that sounds fantastic as far as activists, and we have been using that for registration, for example, right? But then this incident sort of taught me a lesson and said, wait a minute, here we are, activists on the ground, making sure that people are getting registered and that we're delivering them to the Board of Election by hand, making sure they're counted, making sure they're received, right? But then that also offers anyone behind that counter 100, 200, 300 ballots all in one shot from the Muslim community to do something or the other with. And I hope that's not the case, that's widespread, but certainly I think that contributed to what had occurred here in Lackawanna and Erie County, right? So we need to take a step back and look at that strategy and see whether or not it's actually working for us, or are we making it too easy for our votes to be suppressed or somehow, tampered with. The other issue, of course, is just we need to get the knowledge and education out there, Brother Edward. I mean, for those that are registered, fantastic, but they have to know that it's not just about being registered or having an idea of what they may do. They need to choose a plan. How do they want to vote? Do they want to do it by absentee ballot? Well, there are dates that are imposed here. You need a time frame, and not everybody is educated about that. And not everyone is counting the days on the calendar to allocate the space and time that's necessary for their vote to get there in time, right? So we have that issue. Then we also have an issue in which the New York State legislature just pushed and Governor Cuomo signed, an opportunity for people to correct their absentee ballot if there's something, if their absentee request, if there's something slightly wrong with it, because there are rules that people are not necessarily aware of. You got to use the second envelope. It has to be signed. Things need to match, right? So all these little rules that are fairly new have been complicated, obviously, by the pandemic, have been complicated by things like language access for many members of our community. And it's really up to activists and organizations like CAIR and its chapters throughout the nation to educate our folks and to make sure that they utilize their vote and to really sort of empower them and remind them that every single day, policies on a local, state, and federal level are targeting our community in a very direct way. And so it's really important for them to overcome whatever they need to overcome to make sure that their vote actually counts. And we're here to help.
And, Afaf, what's remarkable is you're in New York, very quote unquote, liberal state, very diverse state. And just the fact that could happen, the 200 ballot issue thing could happen there, the fact that people have to put this much thought into voting, it's just insane. If voting is the bedrock of how American government works, you would think we have our election day, number one, on the weekend, number two, or, federal holiday at least, that you could be automatically registered when you turn 18. There are all sorts of easy things you could do. And the fact that those things have not happened yet, to me, the only logical explanation is that there are some politicians in this country who do not want everyone to vote. They want to make it a little hard to vote or very hard to vote in the hope that someone will just give up and turn away. And therefore, make it easier for someone to win with a minority support in the community. Hodo, let me turn to you. In terms of Minnesota, so we had this issue with the debunked attack on the Somali American community there. What other things are you all doing to prepare for the election? What are you concerned about? What are you getting ready for? Just give us like a sense of what you all are doing to get ready for this election.
Yes. So we recently had, not too long ago, before the president got confirmed for positive corona, he was here in Duluth, not too far, 3 hours away from our cities. And that's also very concerning for our community members, even though we're very too far away. The remarks that he made there at that moment he was there was really affecting and giving other right-wing members the inspiration to come to us and have now the openness to do whatever they really want, which is not acceptable. But we're getting prepared to be watching the polling during the election night and protect our community members. We're going to be in contact with all the local officials and law enforcement and making sure that our community members feel safe to vote that night and during out this whole process. My effort actually has been calling, phone banking, texting our community, all of our Muslims, saying, hey, if you need a request absentee ballot, this is how you request and do this. If you want to go to a safe polling place, this is where you go. Like helping our community members get the right information. So when they do vote, they are voting for their own reasons, but we're providing all the resources that they need. Also, we are working with our other coalition group members here in our state to make sure that our communities feel safe. And how do we, anything could happen. Like, I swear to God, but I'm not very fearful. And all I know is that anything could happen in that night. But how do we be safe and prepared with a tactical and strategy, as well as taking care of our community, is our main priority, and making sure that our vote matters.
That's great. But you know what's so strange listening to both of you talk is, remember back when America was occupying Iraq and was arranging the elections, and you'd have everyone be afraid, oh my, what's going to happen? Are polling places going to be attacked? Or are there going to be suicide bombings? Is there going to be attacks on voters? Are voters going to be attacked afterwards? Based on, it sounds like it sounds like we're living under occupation. Like, why are we worried about being attacked when voting? Why are we worried about being intimidated by people armed with weapons or people acting as amateur poll watchers? This is insane. This is supposed to be the shining light of representative government in the world, and we're all sitting here having to think about how we're going to prepare to protect ourselves from violence if we turn out to vote. And again, that's partly the fault of our leadership, who have incorrectly called on people en masse to just show up at polling places to act as poll watchers, which is not how it works. You can poll watch, but it's a limited number of people. You have to register in advance. And so there's just, there's great concern about what is going to happen on election day. And the other thing I want to note is that, because of the sheer number of mail-in ballots being sent, I think everyone is expecting we won't know a result on election night, that the results that come in will mostly be the results of people who actually voted in person that day, and that it could take days or even weeks for the other votes to be counted. And of course, the concern is if that happens, are there going to be court challenges to try to block the counting of mail-in ballots? Or are there going to be, attempts to target, the places where mail-in ballots are being counted, with protests, armed protests? I mean, there are all sorts of things that people are concerned about. So I think we have to not only think about election day, but what happens after election day, inshallah. So we're about to wrap up, but Sister Afaf, last question to you, and then to Sister Hodo. What advice would you give to communities around the country about, how to prepare for this election, what they should be doing? If they can only focus on, a few things, what should they be doing? And that could be communities or just a person voting. What advice would you give them?
First and foremost is don't be intimidated and don't let anyone take away your voice. Like I said, these policies directly impact us day in and day out. They impact not only your present day, but tomorrow's future with your children. And I want to remind everybody that as Muslims, we're just as much as American, and our voice counts just as much. And that elections really do sometimes turn, especially on the local level, by a small margin. Every vote actually counts. Make sure that you get out there. That's first and foremost. And then, like I said, implement a plan, Brother Edward. Know what opportunities and what is available to you, and then choose one and follow up on it. And you have organizations, whether it's us or our coalition members, there are plenty of civic engagement organizations who can help you to implement that plan. Know whether or not you're going to do absentee voting and what you need to do in advance for that. Know whether you're going to go for early voting, which site actually does early voting, because not all sites do early voting. It's not necessarily where you go on election day, right? So people need to be aware of that, or go on November 3rd, but don't get held back. That's really first and foremost, that just needs to be absolutely cemented in everybody's mind, inshallah. And then the last thing that I leave people with is something that I had heard actually from one of our CAIR members during the civil rights journey trips that we had in the past. And, Brother Mustafa had said something in a group in that video, which is, people don't hate Muslims because we're believers of God, or because, we are Muslim, we have a faith, but rather because they see us becoming empowered. And people don't like the empowerment. There's a status quo out there, and it serves people's interest to try to intimidate and produce fear. And we cannot not allow that to win. We need to actually live up to the empowerment that is available to us, and then produce the kind of change that's good, not just for our community, but for the whole of the nation. And that's what we have the ability to do.
Inshallah, absolutely. Jazakallah khair. Sister Hoda, what about you? Any final advice for people around the country, or your community, as they think about how to vote on November 3rd or before?
Yeah, well, thank you, Sister Afaf. You really did mention great remarks. And going off of what Sister mentioned, fear being what other people feed off of us is literally what they're going to use us against us. And I don't think fear should be the thing that stops us from voting and showing up. And as a believers of Muslims, we should not allow fear to overtake us, because we believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala at the end of the day. And trusting in Allah and the process, I believe, it's what's going to make us come on the brighter side, inshallah. But I would mention that talk to your coalition members. We use CAIR as a resources, but as well as the tool that you could learn from it. Or like, we're very close with our state of secretary information. If there's any changes with a ballot or absentee ballot or anything, we get them as soon as possible. So we are aware of what's happening in the state level, but as well as nationally. I would recommend that as a Muslim, we are obligated to vote. So use your vote and get out there and be safe, though, like especially with this pandemic that we're dealing. We need to be safer and smarter. And when we become smarter and safer, that's when we're going to get our voices be heard. And it's really important that not only we do it as a Muslim, but we do it for humanity as well.
Inshallah. I think, you made a good point there that, Muslims in America are unique in the world. I mean, there are many Muslims who live in countries with governments that do unjust things, and the governments are dictatorships. So the Muslims living there can't do anything about that, right? You can't take up arms against your government. If you protest, you're going to jail. So you're very limited in your ability to affect change. Here in America, though, we have a government that does some positive things and many unjust things. But what's unique is that we do have an opportunity to do something about it. We have an opportunity to make our voice heard. And even if that means sometimes choosing between the lesser of two bad options, we can still do that, inshallah. And so, we're here in America. This is our home. We all pay taxes. We're all part of the game. We might as well have a say in how the game is being played and make it a little fair, a little more just for ourselves, our neighbors, our community, inshallah, even if it's a little bit of progress or a little less harm. May Allah accept our efforts in that regard. Well, thank you both for joining us, Hodo and Afaf. It's a pleasure to speak to both of you. Jazakallah khairan for your efforts. May Allah keep you and your families and your community safe. And we look forward to seeing you again on CAIR on Air soon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
And to all of you watching, thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of CAIR on Air, the Muslim Action Hour. If you have a topic you'd like us to address, just email us at info@cair.com. That's info@CAIR.com, so we can consider that topic. And if you have anyone you want us to bring on as a guest, let us know that as well, inshallah. We hope you're making a plan to vote and to vote safely and securely. And may Allah protect you and your families, and may Allah guide us all to be worthy of better leadership all around the world. Assalamu